I'm a 35-year-old male looking at, getting a little bit fitter, but I can butterfly pull up rather than even just the kipping pull up variation. I choose the butterfly. I choose the kipping handstand instead of the strict because I want to get a faster time.
I think that comes down to that whole idea of training versus testing again, right? Like in that example, I struggle with my butterfly pull-ups from a technical standpoint. That I feel is the apt reason to choose to do butterfly pull-ups. But I also need to be aware then in that sense that, hey, I'm using, say it's a set of 15, I'm using this to do 3 sets of 5 and I'm going to make them super clean. That would be my way of attacking it, right? So, and same thing with the handstands. It's like, okay, I'm going to go strict because my pressing strength needs work or anything like that. So I think the sport specific, if you're choosing the easy option to go fast, you need to be aware of why you're doing that. It all comes down to intention and your own personal intention behind the piece.
Welcome back to the Unbound Unplugged podcast. This will be episode 19. Today we're looking at talking about methodology versus madness, the differences between CrossFit the method and CrossFit the sport, and what generally a lot of people kind of get a little bit confused because they end up doing a little bit of both. A lot of people don't know where to start. They'll kind of have the goal for longevity, and then halfway through they're trying to compete to get to regionals, and then they're kind of putting their hands in 2 different buckets and not really achieving anything. We have Matt on the podcast today, and Matt's obviously going to be a bit more in the realms of the individualized program, being a semi-final athlete himself. He does individualized program, he programs for other athletes, and it makes it a little bit more of the both side of the coin. So we look at the method, which is our general class work and what people normally do in the gym and normally do in a CrossFit gym. And then we do the other side with the individualized programming, where that's going to add benefits and what Matt sees a lot of people make mistakes in who don't normally commit all the way or don't really know how to, don't have the mindset, etc. So we'll start with you, Matt. Let's just talk about a little bit what about individualized programming is and what people can expect to get out of it, depending on what their goal is.
So I mean, the answer's kind of in the name, right? Like individualized programming. The way I always pitch it to potential clients or new clients is that this program is built around you. It's what you want. It's built around what you want to achieve, and whether that's longevity, whether that's high levels in the sport, or just generally staying fit and healthy. The program looks like whatever the athlete needs it to look like, right? So if I've got an athlete that wants to make regionals and they are limited in their ability to sustain high power outputs on a rower for anything longer than 2 minutes, that's the predominant way their programming is going to look. That might look a little bit like just power development without a rower. It might look like a lot of rowing sessions working around building power, and sort of just figuring out where those deficiencies lies for them. If I've got someone else who's going to come to me and tell me that they need to pass the physical fitness test to get into the police academy, that's going to look very different, right? So that person's going to be doing, I think, their push-ups, they've got to do a beep test, etc. They essentially don't need to touch a rower, right? So it's all going to be very individualized to the athlete, to what they need to do. At the end of the day, me personally, and obviously since we're CrossFit based, CrossFit serves as the backbone for whatever I'm doing. Even if I have an athlete who doesn't necessarily want to compete in CrossFit or isn't predominantly a CrossFit athlete, I'm probably still going to use some of the CrossFit methodology to program for them, right? It's more fun, it's less boring.
It's more variety, and essentially, like, I find that a lot of people, they might start one thing and then they dip their toe into the other. They're like, okay, I want this individualized programming because I find in my classes I'm not really getting as much focus on the snatch or maybe some gymnastic work. They start working with you. Is there a point where you find that people try to start making that transition to becoming something like a quarterfinal athlete?
Generally people start coming over to individualized programming because they need skill. They need help with the skill. So I've got a few people that have come to me because they're like, I was doing classes and I haven't got a muscle up and I really want to get a muscle up, but the touching on it once a week in a class is not getting me there. And obviously, right, like it's not enough to do it once a week if you're nowhere near there. So in terms of, there's a point where people start trying to dip their toe in. I find it's a lot of people coming out of classes that this is generally where I see it go. So they do classes, they are your class competitors, and they're they're RXing everything. They're trying to be at the top of the leaderboard for the class all the time. They'll go ahead and they'll qualify for quarterfinals, or they'll do the open and they'll just miss, and they're like, oh, I need to work on that. Most of the time it's, I need to do more. I need more programming. And that's when they dip their toe in group programming, or they start pulling extra pieces out of, the CompTrain free blog. I don't know if they still have that, but those kinds of things. They start adding that volume onto their training. Another year goes by. They don't get any better, or they don't improve by as much as they thought they would. They still haven't got their muscle up, or whatever that skill is. And that's when they come over to hiring a coach. They're like, oh, well, that didn't work. I need X.
Something more, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, I see it all the time on my intake forms is like, I need to put more time into X skill or X area or whatever it is. I need more strength work. I need more conditioning. Because at the end of the day, class programming, group programming, it's written to be balanced for a broad group of people, right? So one of the, I write an affiliate program, and one of the principles that we're after, or that I'm subscribing to when I write that program, is don't target specific physiological adaptations. Because if I write a 10-minute AMRAP of rowing, thrusters, and pull-ups, right? If I'm fitter than you, or I'm fitter than you, that workout for me might look like, from a physiological standpoint, workout might look like I'm sitting on a bike or a rower for 10 minutes. My heart rate stays steady. I don't have any peaks and troughs, etc. However, say you do that workout and you're less fit, your row might look like a nice steady pace. You might hit your thrusters and you get this peak in heart rate. You might jump into your pull-ups and you level out a little bit, but now you're peaking as you break in your sets. So our heart rate and our physiological response to that workout is very different. So when you're programming for a class or that group program, you can't have specific adaptations in mind. You can start to in cyclical modalities like a bike or whatever it is. It might be 30-second hard effort, and a hard effort is going to be subjective to everyone. But something like a 10-minute CrossFit workout, that's going to be different for everybody, right? Yeah. So I think group programs, you don't get to target physiological adaptations. It takes too long for someone to get really good. There's always going to be your cream of the crop that's always going to rise to the top no matter what, but they already are fit on those programs. So I find it's the guys that need the extra help. They know there's an issue, but they don't know how to fix it. That's when they come over to
the individualized stuff. And then you look at quarterfinals. It's for many people potentially the highest point of their CrossFit career. Like, making the quarterfinals is no easy feat, but it's not necessarily hard if you've got a good background in fitness and you're well-rounded in CrossFit. Yeah. Generally, you see a lot of people aiming for that as their goal for the open, trying to make the quarterfinals, those competitive people in that class environment. And the ones that I find that generally fall short, obviously, are the ones with the bigger holes in their training, whereas the ones who just have a good general fitness and can do everything, they might just be the class warrior. They show up 6 days a week. They get all the variety of the generalized program. They seem to make it with ease compared to those people who have those bigger holes. So that's kind of what you were saying, where those people who know that they really struggle in a certain area, maybe mobility is a big issue where it comes to snatching, or maybe, they just haven't had time to develop the upper body strength or the skill work in the muscle up, they might need an individualized program. And then looking at mindset, that's probably the next phase of it. So you've got these people who are like, yep, I definitely want to make quarterfinals. Like, that's my goal. I've been, doing class programming, but I just don't feel like it's enough, or I feel like I need to do more. They look at doing the individualized programming and then they fall short with that. Not 90% of the time, it's not because of what the program has in it. It's generally because of their mindset. What would you suggest be something that people think about when they are coming into the Open, the quarterfinals? They've been doing individualized programming. They may have lacked the intensity of having others around them to kind of give them a push. What would your take on it be? You're being someone who trains pretty much alone a lot of the time.
I think in terms of mindset and coming into those workouts, a lot of people that train on their own, and this all depends on how you train on your own. So there's a big difference between testing and competing, right? Testing and training, or competing and training. If I'm competing, I'm trying to go as fast as I can. I'm trying to do the absolute best that I can in said workout. And if that means I have a workout with 50 chest to bar and I break them in 10 sets of 5 to go as fast as I can, rather than trying to go a big unbroken set and then rest, that so be it, right? Now, I think a lot of people that train on their own, and this is my personal problem that I have, they're not used to racing, right? Now, quarterfinals, the online component of the Open and quarters, makes it a little bit easier not to have to race, but it also makes it really easy to come out too hot. So I think for those people, when they're training on their own, doing their own thing, you either need to have an intention to your piece. So if I give someone a 3-round workout of, let's just say it's rowing, thrusters, and pull-ups again, the intention might be, hey, I want negative splits, right? I want you to get faster each round. Whereas someone who's just going into that workout and attacking it, they might come out too hot. They might not learn how to pace. So I think the biggest thing there is learning how to pace appropriately on your own, and then not getting overzealous or over excited when an actual competitive workout comes out and you're having to compare against other people. At the end of the day, competing's a skill, and when you do individualized programming, if you're not training with people, a lot of the time you will lose that a little bit. But it's all about knowing yourself and knowing what you can do, right? Like for me personally, I know exactly what I can hold on a rower. I know exactly how big my sets on toes to bar or thrusters is going to be. So I think it comes down to a little bit more self-awareness and knowing your own paces, rather than getting caught out in that competitive environment and then excessively pushing your pace because you're trying to go as fast as you can.
For people who are training alone, they need to be aware of what they can do, what they can manage to hold on to, what's a bit too risky, what's too shallow, like not enough work, and have an idea of like what paces, what lifts, what like amount of rest they need between reps. So they've got to be more tactical when they come to their training. Yeah,
you have to have a high degree of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right? Because and you should, if you're on individual programming, it means you've already been aware enough to turn around and say, okay, something's wrong, or something's not where it needs to be. I need help. But you need to have the self-awareness of knowing that I can hold this, I can do this. You also need the experience of knowing that you can do this. I saw it and honestly, I think people that struggle when they come to the Open and quarters, from what I've personally seen, that say it's somebody that should make quarterfinals and then they don't, right? A lot of the time, and when I say should, I mean they've got the skills they need to get in, they can do it, they can do whatever it is, but they're not making it because of execution errors. Most of the time it's because they blow up, right? They go out too hot, they fall off the pace, and then they put themselves in the hole. That's where I talk about self-awareness, right? A good example of that's 23.1, which was that repeat with the 60 cal row at the start. So a lot of people come out and row 16 to 1800 cal an hour in that workout, and then they blew up for the rest of the workout. Now, if I row that 60 cal row at 1600 and you row it at 1400, we're going to get off within 20 to 30 seconds of each other. So it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of that, and I see a lot of that. I feel like that's the main issue for those that should make it.
Yeah. So just the ability to understand their own pace, understand how much they can hurt, how far they can push themselves before it gets too much. And would you say that's just having more, like, in training, taking more of those risks, or pushing yourself further than you need to, just to find out, what's your limit and what's not?
Yeah, exactly. A good example of this is, and I did this a long time ago with handstand walking. A lot of the time when I do them, they're in 25-foot segments, so 7.5 meters. And I had this thing for a long time that was, as soon as I kicked down from a handstand on one length, I would kick up as soon as I could. And if I wasn't ready, I would still do it. And I kept saying to myself, like, take a risk, right? And it's things like that. Like, and I say it to athletes all the time, whether it's when we do the throwdowns on the weekends or whatever, and we'd like debrief afterwards. One of the things I often find myself saying to somebody is like, I knew that I could do that. Where they're like, yeah, you got me here. And I'm like, yes, I knew I could kick up. I knew I could hold on to a set of 10, whatever it was. It's like, yeah, you have that knowledge, that pre-existing knowledge, that you're capable of whatever it is. So I think it's just taking your training experience and being able to leverage it when it actually matters. And also, like you said, taking the risks, challenging yourself so that when it comes to it, hey, I can do that.
It's not going to blow up in your face. Then you're not going to do 60 cows in the row in 2 minutes and be like, crap, I have no energy left to tote a bar now. So the last thing about the methodology versus the sport, what you generally see in some class programming, which can be a little bit off-putting, is you see a lot of sport-specific movements come up time and time again. Normally they're just like, there'll be a movement and people choose to go the variation that's more sport-specific because it means they're going to get the faster time in class. It means they're going to move a little bit quicker from the component. What do you reckon are the pros and cons of adding those sport-specific movements into class programming? And what have you seen has worked and hasn't worked when it comes to that?
What do you mean when you say sport-specific movements?
So like, it may be instead like, okay, I'm a 35-year-old male looking at, getting a little bit fitter, but I can butterfly pull up rather than even just the kipping pull up variation. I choose the butterfly. I choose the kipping handstand instead of the strict because I want to get a faster time.
I think that comes down to that whole idea of training versus testing again, right? Like, if I say I'm a 35-year-old male athlete, if I know that in that example, I struggle with my butterfly pull-ups from a technical standpoint, that I feel is the apt reason to choose to do butterfly pull-ups. But I also need to be aware then in that sense that, hey, I'm using, say it's a set of 15, I'm using this to do 3 sets of 5 and I'm going to make them super clean. That would be my way of attacking it, right? So, and same thing with the handstands. It's like, okay, I'm going to go strict because my pressing strength needs work or anything like that. So I think the sport specific, if you're choosing the easy option to go fast, you need to be aware of why you're doing that. It all comes down to intention and your own personal intention behind the piece. And I think that's where, you can take group programming, class programming, and you can individualize it to a certain degree by saying, okay, this workout is this, 3 rounds for time, 500-meter row, 15 chest to bar pull-ups, 15 strict handstand push-ups, or 15, let's just say 15 handstand push-ups and chest to bar pull-ups. So you have your own choice there, right? If my intention is to push that workout as hard as I can and test it, by all means, go for it. If my intention in that workout is to work on my upper body pulling capacity, then my thing is, I should change that to kipping pull-ups. Do whatever you want with the handstands. I think it comes down to your own intentions as you go into it. For the most part, the sport-specific movements, I don't think there's anything wrong with someone doing them. I really don't. I think they're great. It's fine. Even butterfly pull-ups, as bad of a rap as they build a lot of shoulder strength as long as you've got pre-existing shoulder strength to tolerate the movement, right?
Yeah.
It's the same as, squatting 200 is going to make you a very strong squatter as long as you can squat 200 before you get there. The same, like, it's you know.
Yeah, there's no functional, like from the functional standpoint, you'll never need to squat really more than your body weight. Like you're never going to load anything like that and then sit down. Like, so I guess from that standpoint, it makes sense. It's like, you know, is that really functional? I mean, to other movements it is, but not to life. So I think that really well covers off the method of CrossFit versus the sport, differences between group and individualized programming, and the benefits and some of the tips that you've given. Now, Matt, if someone's looking at getting individualized programming from you, where are they going to look?
I coach for TTT, so you'd have to go through Training Think Tank. You can head to their website, apply for coaching through there.
And they quote Matt Gilpin for that one.
Yeah, quote Matt Gilpin and they'll send you to me.
And say that you have holes in your training.
You need to be fixed.
And that's going to cover off our episode 19, methodology versus madness. Leave any comments down below, any questions you may have about this podcast.